How inmates become leaders in prison gangs. The bus rattled as it climbed the fog-covered road toward Pelican Bay State Prison, the supermax where California's most high-risk inmates were housed. The air felt colder here, as if the ocean wind carried warnings. Inside the transport cage, newly arrived inmate Marcus Hale kept his head lowered, wrists locked in restraints, but his mind raced. He had survived county jail. He had survived sentencing. But this was different. This was where reputations were built or erased. As the bus doors opened, armed officers led the new arrivals across the concrete yard. Not a single inmate was visible. Pelican Bay's SHU blocks weren't designed for crowds. They were designed for control. As Marcus walked, he felt eyes watching from behind narrow windows cut into steel doors. This was where the hierarchy lived. Not in open yards. Not in day rooms. But behind silent doors, in whispers, gestures, and coded alliances. Inside intake, Lieutenant Jeremiah Cross reviewed each file with methodical precision. He had worked at San Quentin, Folsom, Ironwood, but Pelican Bay always unsettled him the most. Here, influence wasn't loud. It was silent, calculated, invisible. He looked at Marcus's paperwork, no gang affiliation on record. No tattoos signaling membership. No documented associations. But Cross had been in the system long enough to know that leaders weren't recruited for muscle. They were recruited for usefulness. Marcus took a seat on the metal bench, chains clinking softly. Across from him sat a man who looked as though Pelican Bay had carved him from concrete. Older, weathered, eyes sharp as broken glass. The inmate leaned forward slightly. "You knew," he murmured. Marcus nodded. The man scanned him slowly. "Keep your head down your first month." Eyes open. Mouth closed. Marcus swallowed. "Why?" The man smirked. "Because the day rooms don't decide who climbs the ladder. The tier does. And the tier is always watching." Before Marcus could respond, officers escorted the older inmate away. But his warning burned into Marcus's mind. Later, inside the SHU orientation hallway, Cross addressed the new arrivals. "Some of you will remain here temporarily," he said. "Others will be evaluated for long-term placement. Behavior, associations, and risk indicators determine everything." His voice echoed against the cold walls. In this prison, leadership doesn't look like power on the streets. It looks like influence, communication, strategy. Some inmates come in with no affiliation and leave controlling entire tiers. Others try to climb too fast and end up isolated. Marcus listened carefully. He wasn't planning to climb anything. He was planning to survive. But survival inside high-security prisons had rules, unwritten ones. Rules even the officers acknowledged quietly, because ignoring them meant blind spots. Marcus was placed temporarily in F Block, a high-risk general population unit known across California for the level of control certain groups quietly held. As officers removed his restraints and escorted him into his cell, Marcus noticed small details. Scratched symbols etched into the metal frame of the bunk. A folded piece of paper left in the corner. The faint, rhythmic tapping from a cell 2 doors down. Every detail meant something. Every detail was a message. That night, while lying on the thin mattress, Marcus heard footsteps in the corridor and the metallic click of the food slot opening. A folded note slid inside. He hesitated, then opened it. "Walk the yard tomorrow. Alone. Someone will approach you." Marcus's chest tightened. He had no enemies here. No allies. But silence could be misread as defiance, and defiance could be misread as disrespect. At dawn, the yard gates opened. Only a handful of inmates stepped outside, scattered in deliberate patterns. No one clustered. No one lingered too close to another group. Marcus walked along the concrete edge, pretending not to notice the eyes tracking him. Then someone approached, the same older man from intake. "You followed the note," he said. Marcus's voice was low. "You sent it?" "No. But I knew you'd get it." The man scanned the yard. "In here, new blood gets tested. Not with fights. With choices. Someone wants to see if you move smart." "Who?" Marcus asked. The man gave a subtle nod toward the far corner, where 3 inmates sat away from the rest, posture straight, expressions unreadable. Those are the ones who decide rank? Who gets influence? Marcus asked. The man shook his head. No. Those are the ones who watch. Leadership doesn't start with titles. It starts with being noticed. Marcus felt unease gather in his stomach. Why me? Because you're quiet, the man said. And quiet men don't get loud unless there's a reason. They're looking for thinkers. Communicators. People who don't panic. Marcus looked across the yard. The 3 inmates in the corner weren't threatening. They were studying. Measuring. And if I don't want to be part of anything? Marcus asked. The older inmate's expression turned serious. Then you'd better hope the people measuring you come to the same conclusion. Before Marcus could respond, an alarm sounded, brief, sharp, calling all inmates back to the cells. Officers moved quickly, ushering them inside. As Marcus stepped into his cell, he saw something on his bunk. A second note. This one was shorter. More ominous. You're already part of it, whether you know it or not. Marcus felt a chill crawl down his spine. Because when he flipped the note over, there was a symbol. A simple one. But one used in several U.S. prisons for decades to mark someone as a prospect. A prospect for influence. A prospect for responsibility. A prospect for leadership, the kind built in shadows. Marcus stared at the mark. As the steel door slammed shut behind him. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Every sound felt sharper. The distant clank of gates, the faint echo of footsteps along F block, the soft scrape of someone sliding a cup against their door. But nothing rattled him more than the symbol on the note. It was small. Simple. But inside high-security prisons, simplicity carried weight. The mark meant eyes were on him, evaluating him, testing him, deciding whether he was someone who could be shaped, or someone who needed to be checked. At shift change the next morning, Lieutenant Cross walked the tier with 2 officers. He paused at Marcus's door, glancing inside. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but Cross noticed something, the tension in his shoulders, the restless movement in his hands. You settling in? Cross asked. Yes, sir, Marcus replied, voice controlled. Cross studied him for a moment longer. In this facility, staying quiet is smart, until it isn't. Marcus didn't respond. Cross continued down the tier, but the message lingered like fog in the cell. Recreation call came early. Marcus stepped into the small yard, breathing the cold morning air. Only 3 other inmates were out, spaced apart, moving casually but never aimlessly. The same quiet watchers from yesterday. Marcus walked a slow lap around the perimeter. His heart pounded with each step. As he rounded the corner near the pull-up bars, someone approached from behind. Keep walking, the voice said. Marcus didn't turn. Why me? You were marked. That's the only reason anyone gets approached. Marcus kept his pace steady. I didn't ask for that. No one ever does, the man said. But if you got the mark, someone thinks you can be useful. Marcus felt frustration rise. Useful how? Doing what? The man finally stepped into view, tall, calm, carrying himself with a confidence that came from years inside. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't tense. He was measuring Marcus just as carefully as the others had. In here, the man said, leadership isn't claimed. It's observed. Tested. You'll be watched in the chow hall, on the tier, during work assignments. Every movement tells them something. Who's them? Marcus asked. The man smirked. The structure. Marcus frowned. There's no official structure. The man chuckled. Every prison has one. Even the ones that pretend they don't. He leaned closer. And if you want to survive, you need to learn what the structure sees in you. Before Marcus could reply, the yard buzzer blared. Time was up. The man walked away without looking back. By midday, the test began. Marcus was assigned to kitchen duty, one of the most monitored areas in F Block. But in every U.S. high-security facility, the kitchen was also where influence quietly moved. Not through fights. Not through violence. Through information. As Marcus scrubbed trays, an inmate beside him whispered, "You're the new one from Pelican Bay intake?" Marcus didn't answer. The man continued, "They want to see if you listen too much or too little." Marcus frowned. "Who?" The man gave a slow nod toward the loading dock. 3 inmates sat together, not working, not talking, just watching. Marcus understood now. The evaluation wasn't theatrical. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, strategic. Every second in the kitchen became a coded conversation. Did he stay in his lane? Did he move nervously? Did he ask questions? Did he avoid people too obviously? Every detail mattered. When the shift ended, he returned to his cell exhausted, not from labor, but from pressure. That's when he found the 3rd note. This one was taped to the inside of his vent. "You moved well. But leadership requires patience. Tomorrow, you'll be tested again." Marcus sat on his bunk, staring at the message. He didn't want leadership. He didn't want power. He wanted survival. But survival inside a high-security U.S. prison had always operated by invisible rules. Rules older than any warden. Rules older than Cross. Rules that moved from Pelican Bay to Folsom, from San Quentin to USP Victorville, carried by the stories of men who understood the unspoken chain of influence. That night during count, an unexpected sound echoed from the far end of F Block. A foot tapping. So rhythmic. The same code Marcus had heard on his first day. Officers continued their checks, unaware, but Marcus listened closely. The tapping moved from cell to cell, a message rippling along the tier like a controlled current. Then it stopped. Silence. Marcus felt his pulse thudding in his neck. The tapping started again, lower, slower, forming a pattern. A pattern he didn't yet understand. Minutes later, a small object slid under his door. A pencil stub, barely an inch long. He picked it up, confused. Then he saw the note lying next to it. "Leadership begins when you learn the language. Write the pattern you heard." Marcus froze. They weren't testing his strength. They were testing his memory, his discipline, his ability to decode. Traits that mattered more behind bars than anything else. He crouched near the door and began writing the tapping sequence on the back of the note. As he worked, he felt something shift in the air, as if someone outside was watching his silhouette through the bottom of the door. When he finished, he slid the note back out. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the tapping started again, quicker this time, almost approving. And a second note slid in. Marcus unfolded it slowly. "Good. Tomorrow we see if you can follow the pattern, not just hear it." He sat back, heart pounding. The test wasn't about joining anything. It was about proving he could think like a leader, whether he wanted to or not. Because inside these walls, leadership didn't wait for volunteers. It chose you. The next morning arrived with an unsettling quiet. No notes. No tapping. No signs. Marcus sat on the edge of his bunk, waiting for something, anything, to break the tension coiled in his stomach. But nothing came. When the tier doors finally buzzed open for morning movement, Marcus stepped out. The walkway felt different today. Slower, more deliberate, every inmate positioned as if waiting for an unseen cue. Lieutenant Cross monitored the line from the podium above. He scanned the tier with a practiced eye, noticing how certain inmates lingered longer near Marcus. Cross didn't know the specifics, but he had worked enough high-security yards to recognize patterns of selection. Someone was being evaluated. Someone was being watched. And the focus wasn't on him, it was on Marcus. In the chow hall, Marcus carried his tray to an empty table. But before he could sit, an inmate blocked his path. A man built like concrete, with a calm, calculating expression. "You can't sit there," the man said. Marcus didn't challenge him. "Where should I sit?" The man pointed to a table in the corner. Marcus sensed the test immediately. That table wasn't occupied by muscle. It wasn't occupied by the loudest inmates. It was occupied by the quiet ones. The thinkers, the planners, the ones who spoke rarely but influenced everything. When Marcus sat down, the entire room seemed to shift its attention. 3 pairs of eyes locked onto him. One of them belonged to the same quiet observer from the yard, the man who had told him leadership in prison wasn't claimed, but observed. "You remembered the pattern," the man said. Marcus nodded. "I wrote it down." "That wasn't the test," the man replied. The test was whether you'd understand what the pattern meant. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He studied their expressions, looking for an opening, not a weakness, but a direction. It wasn't a message, Marcus finally said. It was a roll call. A check of who could listen and who couldn't. A faint smile appeared on the man's face. Good. Because listening is the first step to influence. He leaned closer. And influence is the only real currency inside these walls. Before Marcus could ask questions, a loud buzzer signaled the end of chow. The quiet group rose together and walked away without another word. But their silence said everything. Marcus had passed another test. Back in F Block, the pressure intensified. Inmates who had ignored him now nodded in recognition. Officers took longer glances at his cell. Even Cross paused outside more often, studying him with cautious curiosity. That evening, recreation call brought another shift. Wait until you see what happens when the next one starts. Hit subscribe, because this story is just getting started.